in the chiropractic profession, as well as the pediatric realm of chiropractic and the neurology of chiropractic. But what I do is I really start to have the conversation with parents that it's less about pain and more about the brain and the nervous system. So just as the spine protects the nervous system and the skull protects the brain, we have to understand that the brain and the nervous system, guys, it runs the show. It controls function, all right, of everything in the entire body. And the primary function of the nervous system is to perceive the environment, adapt to the environment, and coordinate the behavior of all other cells, organs, and systems in the body. Every single second of every single waking minute of every single day for you and your child. If at any point they have an inability to adapt, the nervous system becomes overly stressed, overly taxed, and at some point you're going to lose function of the body. This is when symptoms, diagnoses, labels, and disease start to come to the surface. So this really is what we look at. Again, we have the word which referred to subluxation, which is really a stress pattern. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the subluxation in just a moment. But guys, it's really just cause and effect, right? So the cause for a lot of these seizure cases and epileptic seizures either have one or more, oftentimes more, of the 3 T's that we just talked about a moment ago. The trauma or the physical stress, the toxins or the chemical stress, and the thoughts or the emotional stress. And again, these 3 things drive that neural shitstorm in you or your kid's scenario. Now, the science behind this, there's a couple ones that I want to talk about, which we refer to as the effect. We have dyskinesia, disafferentation, dysautonomia, and dyskinesis. And I'm going to talk a little bit about each of these in a little bit more detail and how it ties in to the diagnosis that you or your child may be having. The first D is what we refer to as dyskinesia. And this word specifically, guys, refers to motion or kinetics. Now, when there is a subluxation, and in this scenario, subluxation occurs when a joint becomes either misaligned and or fixated, so it loses its proper range of motion. This is what that subluxation is in this scenario, loss of motion. Now, when you have either a misalignment or a fixation of the spinal joint, all right, and oftentimes that is due to a trauma that has occurred very early on in the individual or the child's life, left unchecked, left uncorrected, there is a third component of the subluxation, which is the neurologic component. All right. The neurological disturbance, interference, or stress takes place at the level of the physical misalignment or fixation within the spine. And oftentimes, guys, this is going to be located in the upper cervical region of the neck, C1, C2. This is where all that trauma takes place when they're pulling these kids out, either the birth canal, if they're stuck, forceps, vacuum extraction, or cesarean. That's where all that trauma takes place, guys. So to go just a little bit deeper in it, we took about the neurology here. We have a representation of the spine on the left, which is a misaligned representation of the brain, the skull, the spine, and on the right, a aligned representation of the spine and the skull. Now, the area, to orient you guys a little bit, the area in red in both of these diagrams is the brainstem, and the bone highlighted in yellow is C1 or atlas. Now, the reason we call this the main breaker is because the brainstem, which is directly attached to the brain itself, directly ties in and connects the 2 systems, the brain and the nervous system. Any misalignment, any subluxation at this segmental level is going to cause some issues from a neurological standpoint. I want to briefly go in and show you a birth here and hopefully shed some light on where all this starts and the amount of trauma that is truly taking place during the child's birth. This right here is a cesarean birth. In addition to the cesarean birth, there is a vacuum extraction that takes place here as well as a manual extraction. And I want you to look at the amount of trauma and rocking and force that is used to pull this child from the womb here.
Here at
right, so there you have the vacuum extraction. And now there's going to be a manual extraction here, again, by the head, by the neck, the main breaker, right up top, brainstem, neurology. Okay? Now, guys, that amount of force is so traumatic for these kids and for their tiny little joints of the spine. It, with 100% certainty, is going to cause trauma at those upper cervical joints. And when that happens, it's automatically going to throw the neurology into a state of stress and total chaos. When you have the first trauma, all right, the birth, this idea of dyskinesia, abnormal motion, it's going to lead to the second D, what we refer to as disafferentation. All right. Now, what this means is basically anytime a joint of the spine loses its proper range of motion or alignment, automatically you're going to get what we refer to as decreased proprioception. So the normal calming sensation within the body is going to be decreased, all right, or suppressed, and you're going to get increased nociception. And what I mean by nociception in this sense, guys, is not pain, but is stress that is wired into the nervous system. So noxious stimuli, stress patterns, chaos, the wiring just gets locked in. All right, so you get this abnormal fluctuation between a very, very calming part of the nervous system and a very, very stressed part of the nervous system. And again, if an individual has been wired since birth, it's like two streams coming together, guys. One is big, one is small. The dominant stream is going to win out every single time. So is it any wonder that these kids are locked in a very high nociceptive, stressed pattern state from such a young time in their life? It's no coincidence at all. This is just the science. This is the neurology, guys. But I guarantee you will not hear this from any pediatrician, any neurologist, or any medical doctor at any institution. You will never hear this from them. So the role of the spine, all right, 90% of the brain's focus is on recognizing these two sensory inputs, proprioception and nociception. 10% of the nervous system, guys, is responsible for pain. So understand, it's not about how these kids are feeling. It's not whether they have pain or not, or whether they can express it to you or not. It's not about pain. It's about how their nervous system is functioning, or in the case of you or your child, it's how you or their nervous system is not functioning. All right? If you or your child have a history of seizures or epilepsy, you have a nervous system that is in a state of chaos and is in a state of overload, that is in a nociceptive dominant state, is not adapting and not functioning the way it's designed to function. I guarantee you that. This representation right here, I know you can't see all this, but this model, we refer to it as the gas versus the brake. Up top, you'll see the 3 T's that we discussed and how they tie in to these stress patterns for these individuals that struggle with seizures or epilepsy. You have the trauma, particularly the birth process, yes, the toxins, all right, and then the emotional stress as well. Now, from a neurological standpoint, when these things enter the system, the individual automatically is going to go into what we refer to as a gas pedal sympathetic dominant state. That's where all these labels or diagnoses are at. That's on the right side of this diagram. On the left side of the diagram, you have what we refer to as the brake pedal. This is the parasympathetic side of the nervous system. The parasympathetic side of the nervous system is responsible for growth, healing, development, rest, and relaxation. Now, in the case of you or your child, where would you say that there or you are spending the majority of you or their time from a neurological standpoint? The gas pedal state, right? They're constantly in a state of sympathetic fight or flight dominance. That's how you and they have been wired since birth. So is it any wonder that unless the nervous system gets reset and there becomes more of a balance between these two systems as it was designed to function, we're continually treating symptoms, searching for answers, performing surgeries, and over-medicating. We have to look to the cause, and you have to remove cause. Everything else, guys, is only treating effects. When you have disafferentation, the next D, the science aspect of this, you get into what's called dysautonomia. All right, dysautonomia, guys, is a state of imbalance or dysfunction of the autonomic nervous system. And at the beginning, what I found very interesting when we talked about a particular type of seizure, an autonomic seizure, it talks about how the seizure affects autonomic function of the body. So it's interesting to tie in. See, medicine and the allopathic model, guys, they recognize certain aspects of what they're saying, but they're only getting part of the scenario. They're missing half of the equation, right? So they'll honor parts of the anatomy, but when it comes to really the actual correction and restoring function, they've completely missed the boat, guys. They've completely missed it. And you and your kids are suffering as a result of them not having an understanding of what is truly going on. They've let you down. They have flat out let you down. They've let your kids down, right? And that needs to change. It's time to change. You need to do something different if you want a different result. Because doing the same of what you always have been doing, all right, and expecting a different result is not going to get you what you're looking for. So when you get into this state of dysautonomia, oftentimes the organs and systems, which is really what the autonomic nervous system is responsible for, the organs and systems start to malfunction. So oftentimes individuals that have a primary diagnosis of seizures or epilepsy will have secondary health challenges. They will have immune system issues. They will have weakened immunity. They will be sick more often. They will constantly be on antibiotics, all right, for ear infections and allergies and sinus issues. They oftentimes have secondary symptoms of digestive issues, either diarrhea, constipation, IBS, Crohn's disease. Again, more labels. And also various other symptoms, neck pain, chronic headaches, cluster headaches, and chronic migraines. How many of you guys out there, either you, yourself, or your kid, in addition to the actual seizure or epilepsy diagnosis, have chronic migraines? The individuals that I've talked to, the majority of them do. All right, but I think now that we've looked at how the trauma aspect of things ties in to the neurology, I think you have a better understanding of how these two things go hand in hand. All right. So really the neurology of stress is as such. And let me remind you guys, we're about 28 minutes into this. We're going to be wrapping up shortly. But again, if at any time this is hitting home to you, right? If this is making sense, I want you to go ahead and like it. All right, comment in the box below. And please, at the end of this video, if you haven't done so already, please share it with another friend, family member, or parent who themselves or has a child who is struggling with these types of health challenges, seizures and epilepsy. We're going to get them some answers. Make sure you go ahead and tag them in the video when you share it, all right? And let's get this information out to them. To get back to the neurology of stress, essentially the sympathetic nervous system engages. It automatically goes into a fight or flight sympathetic dominant state. This then, guys, also then directly influences the autonomic nervous system, as we discussed, organ and system function, right? So it can have a negative effect on immune system, digestion, and various other systems in the body. The adrenals, which are the stress hormones, they sit on top of the kidneys. These adrenal glands get activated, they get overloaded, and they start pumping out stress hormones into the system, into the blood, pump to the brain. The brain